Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 77 of the Ray Bunch. We have a spectacular show. Yes, I know, I said it again, because every show is great. But today's extra spectacular because we have a special guest, Mark Traphagen. Mark has been a guy I followed on Google Plus at first, but now I see him everywhere. And when I say everywhere, everywhere. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, everywhere. So you're going to have the pleasure of talking to Mark today, and we're going to be talking about content and social media platforms. Why are we so attached to them? Are we attached to them to the detriment of our working relationship with our clients? Are we biased about platforms? Specifically Google+. Why are people so passionate about Google+ to the point of almost being a cult? So we're going to start off with introducing Mark. Mark, do you want to say a couple words?
Sure, Ray. First of all, thanks for having me on the Ray Bunch. Always a fantastic show, and so glad to be a part of this group today. A good way to spend my lunch because I'm not ingesting any calories while we're doing this, so that's the best part about it. For anybody that might not know me, I am Mark Traphagen. I'm Senior Director of Online Marketing for Stone Temple Consulting, which is a medium to large-sized business digital marketing consultant firm based in the Boston, Massachusetts area, although I work out of my home here in Durham, North Carolina. And that's who I am.
Great. What's the weather in North Carolina?
It is a little chilly for here. And I emphasize for here. The last couple of days, it's a bit of a cold front. It's about 60 degrees right now,
okay.
But that won't last much longer. But I'm going to continue this streak. I'm spending the rest of the week in Duluth, Minnesota. Where I've
good. Some payback.
I never expected to go, but I've got doing a one-day conference on Thursday there.
That's a long way to go for a one-dayer.
Yeah, it'll get down below freezing at night there, so a little tasty reminder.
Okay, well, welcome to a little bit of Montreal. So I'm just going to go down the list, and if you guys quickly just say hello and who you are. BL?
Hi, I'm BL Achman, and on Twitter I'm at What's Next, and I'm in New York City, where it's an absolutely spectacular spring day. I mean, they don't get prettier than this, but it's a little chilly.
Jess?
Hello, I'm Jess Duell. You can find me online at jessicaduell.com. And here it's raining, but it feels so good in the cool. I've got the windows open.
And for those who don't know, where's here, Jessica?
Seattle. I expected Scott to tell. He's like my twin.
Okay, and from ourselves and Bo, how are you doing, Randy?
I'm doing well. I'm Randy Bowden. You can find me at Bowden to Bowden. I'm a little further south than Mark, so I can put on about 8 or 9 degrees chillier. We've been in the 70s the past couple of days, which is unusual for us this time of year.
Unusual which way? Colder or warmer?
It's usually a little warmer. Usually in the 80s. It's been in the 80s, and we actually tipped the scales at 90 on Sunday. So.
Okay. And Scotty, the other side of Seattle.
The other side of Seattle, I'm the Scott in the Scott treatment, and for once, Jess has got the rain, and all I've got are clouds in 52 degrees.
There you go.
There's the weather forecast.
Thank you for switching into our weather show today. Now we're going to get to the questions. So, my topic came to my head because there was a lot of stuff going on. What clicked it off was another sort of like Google Plus is dead thing, and then reading the comments and the back and forth, and then reading it on other platforms as well and see the difference that there were in the comments. And Mark here has written some amazing pieces that I thought cast a very reasoned look on it. And he can mention that when he gets there. But I want to ask at the very top of the show, because I had quoted Marshall McLuhan, and having being a Canadian, having gone to Canadian University, Marshall McLuhan was the media god. We all sort of sat around and discussed what he meant by the media is the message and all that, and that still goes on. So he was definitely someone with a lot of foresight in terms of the power of the media to change the way we behave. I mean, that happened with radio, with telephones, certainly with television, which he was probably referring to the most. So I'm going to ask Mark and start the questions off today with, how has social media in particular changed the way and the content of what we communicate, or has it?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that it has. And people debate ever since I'm a child of the Marshall McLuhan era as well, and people debated that phrase, "the medium is the message," ever since he said it. But there's certainly at least a kernel, I think a very large kernel of truth to it. And what we see now is, of course, the immediacy of social media, the ability and the democracy of it, for lack of a better term. The fact that anybody can comment on anything, anybody can have a platform to speak out. And that's always been one of our democratic ideals, particularly here in the United States and Western countries. But now we see it in reality, and we sometimes wonder, was it such a great idea as we had first thought? But there's certainly that immediacy, the ability to, and perhaps on some of the downside of that might be, is it affecting reasoned reflection? Because we can respond so quickly, because we can respond in real time and in the form of a tweet, 140 characters to events that are happening in the world or something that somebody said. Does it give time for reasoned reflection? Without going into too much detail, many people have probably heard the horrible stories of people whose reputations have been ruined online, and the classic tale now is that woman that sent out what she intended to be just kind of a funny, ironically meant tweet to some friends that people took as being something racist. She was in the air for 8 hours on an extended flight, didn't know what was going on. Twitter blew up. By the time she landed, she'd lost her job, her reputation was ruined, and it's still having repercussions down to this day. So that's maybe the downside of this. And the one last thing I'll just throw out for now is it's because many of us come out of the marketing world. It's had, I think, a tremendous impact for companies, for businesses, for brands that most businesses, I think, still have not quite grasped, and that is that fact that everybody has a mouthpiece now, and it's not just a broadcast message any longer, but people will talk about your brand, and they will comment on it, and they will react to things that you put out there, and they will find out information about you, right or wrong, that might not have gotten out just a few generations ago, just a generation ago.
Wow. Anybody want to respond to that?
I'd like to get Mark to expand just a little bit on, and I totally agree with what he said on the fact that immediacy and anybody has access now. And thinking about that, you brought out some
losing Randy's audio, not hearing him.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I lost what I said.
You brought out about the downside of that. And when you brought that out, and your example had to do with the platform of Twitter, when I think about that, there's been some fails with people on Facebook, somebody posting something, but the majority of fails that I've seen happen where they've impacted somebody's reputation, losing a job or something like that, in my mind, have come out of the Twitter platform. That's where because it is the expediency of that platform and in real time. So I would think I would like you to just expand on that a little bit in your thoughts of the impact. The impact, like the example that you gave was a woman thought it was private, but by the time she landed, her employer had been notified and she lost her job. So just expand on that negative side just a little bit, Mark, if you can.
Well, that's very insightful Randy, because Twitter is probably one of the best and most obvious examples we have of how this medium affects the message, because it's a very constricted medium. The 140 characters means that what you gain in terms of immediacy, because of that short, quick text message type of style, it's become the default network for that immediate reaction to something that's going on. The downside is the loss of context, and particularly with things like humor, irony, sarcasm. We all know we run into enough trouble with those on networks where we can talk our mouths off and write extended paragraphs. When you're trying to fit that into 140 characters, it can be very difficult and easily misunderstood. So you combine that with the match flame immediacy of Twitter. I think it is the poster child, the case study that we most need to look at when we're talking about how social media affects things. Although other medium are coming in that are just as interesting in that regard. Now we have instant video combined, streaming live video combined with Twitter, with Meerkat and Periscope. We have things like Snapchat, where it's immediate, instantaneous communication just interesting to watch how that affects things.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because I was actually going to ask you if you saw that maybe being common, maybe being adopted more, because people do have that ability to look at people's bodies, and face and stuff to get more context in the conversation, as opposed to taking a chance on hashtag sarcasm or something like that. Do you think Meerkat Periscope is going to take off and change the way we tweet?
I think it already has.
Do you?
Yeah, but I saw something the other day on Twitter apropos what Mark is saying, and it said, "I really miss my pre-internet brain."
Well, we talked about that in the show, how technology has changed the way we actually think, right?
Follow people on Google Plus like David Amerlin and Martin Shervington. They're talking a lot about that kind of thing, and often bring up research that's out there about the plasticity of our brains and how our environment affects us. And when we have a stimulus in the environment, we've never had this. We don't even know. We're in the middle of a laboratory experiment. When you get this kind of stimulus that comes in so quick and it's so prevalent, it's there all day long. I find it hard to break away from the dings that are coming up every moment on this thing. That's
turn them off.
Yeah, it's got to be affecting us logically.
I find that, and I totally agree, and I would love to be able to talk about this subject for like hours, because I find it totally compelling. But we have to get something, maybe go somewhere a little more practical, so that we have, so that people watching will say, well, what's this got to do with me, So I'm going to ask then. The question is do we bring our bias to platforms? And we're asking when we're talking about clients. And the quote that I used from Mark was basically that we have to. I think basically, this is a paraphrase, Mark, that you have to be kind of platform agnostic to serve our clients the best, right? We have to go into a client and choose a strategy or build a strategy that's based on their business goals. However, I do see that a lot of people are going in there with preconceived concepts of what social media is and that type of thing. And I'm going to ask this question basically. So for most people, social media is Facebook. And then everything else is something else. It's a tool or it's an app or whatever. Should we start calling those other platforms? Maybe Google Plus. We shouldn't refer that as part of social media or LinkedIn or because for the vast majority of people, if we're talking social media, they're in their head they're seeing the blue logo. What do you think, Mark?
Well, 1,000 directions I could go with that, but I'm going to try to focus on a business perspective here. Of the use of social media. And I think one of the most dangerous things that can happen to us is something called confirmation bias. I talk about this a lot. I'm seeing it so much in the responses, both to you mentioned at the outset of the show, the Forbes article, last week you had another Google Plus is dead article. You look at the responses, the comments that got from, especially from people who are Google Plus fans, and the majority of it is well, I use it and it's great for me every day, and I have hundreds of friends there, and so it must be tremendous and alive, and that's something that scientists call confirmation bias. That doesn't mean it is or it isn't. It means you're looking at your narrow experience of the world, what you're seeing, and you're projecting it out and assuming that's what everybody sees, that's what everybody experiences, or that's even the reality. For business, I think that can be very dangerous. If you get that kind of, your personal experience with a particular social network, you start to extend it out and think, well, I just assume that's the way my customers experience it, or that's what my customers are doing, and it may not be at all. So it's very important that you be able to recognize that, get past that, and try to take a more objective look and say, what's really going out there, and maybe I don't feel comfortable on this particular social network, or I don't like it as much. It's not where I spend my time. But that's where my customers are, or that's where they're looking for information. You need to know that kind of thing.
Mark, do you think, and taking that bias another step and going back to the double-edged sword, do you think there's a day when CMOs or the guy in charge of the advertising marketing mix in a small business says, look, because we've told everybody out there, marketers told people, social media people told people, you got to be transparent, you got to be here, you got to be there, go where your customers are. But do you see, back to what we were talking about earlier, where you might say a company goes, hey, look, there's just too many negatives that could happen if my employees are playing around in this platform that you restrict that from a brand standpoint?
That's a great question, and another huge subject, because there are a lot of companies that do that, or they're afraid of it. And we encounter it all the time. That they do severely restrict their employees' social media involvement as far as representing the company. But there are other companies, and we're seeing a growing number of them, who are encouraging it. They're running programs to develop it. And when I'm seeing that this is something I'm beginning to look into very deeply and research and look at, because it's a topic of great interest to me. Where I'm seeing that working is where there is already a great company culture, where the company has a culture of trust. The employees are happy employees. They're passionate about the brand and the company. Then you've got something that can work. But to get the heart of your question, there's risk in anything you do in business. Whenever I hear this, and I get this a lot, when I talk about something I call personal brand representatives, which I'm a huge advocate for. It's finding people within your organization who are knowledgeable about the business, passionate about the business, and who have the ability and the desire to go out in content, in social media, to conferences, wherever, and develop an audience around themselves that I believe then reflects back on the brand. Well, doing that, you've got to be developing a company where you've got that kind of environment where people are going to be doing that. But the question I get always is, what about the risk? What if that person leaves, or what if something bad happens? Well, it's risk you do in anything in business. You do an assessment. Is the gain more worth than the risk? And you do things to try to minimize the risk. You have policies and procedures in place to handle it if something bad happens, because that can happen with almost anything that your business is doing. So I don't see that necessarily as a valid objection for pursuing that route.
I don't either. I mean, what about the people who answer your phone? What about the people who deal with your customers on a daily basis? You cannot have control. And if you hire the kinds of people that you can't trust, then you have a really fundamental problem. And this certainly predates the internet. So I don't think that's what you need to be worried about. But there needs to be training, and the investment in training needs to be substantial so that people understand. When I've written social media policies, the basic thing that I say to people is, don't forget you have a day job.
Well, I just want to bring up before we move on. I want to bring up Nazim's point, because it speaks to what I was asking earlier. Some of my clients do not want to touch social media with a 10-foot pole. They just believe that it's a dragon that is hard to harness, and I think we all can relate to that. I certainly have seen it with my clients. And again, it's a lot of that has to do with what way they think is Facebook and the problems of getting any traction on Facebook.
I want to circle back to that, though, and go back to the top of the program and what Mark opening statement talked about, and what BL just said. BL said, hey, think about the receptionist or the person that answers your phone in your business, or the customer service rep. Those are one-offs, okay? Twitter, Facebook, and all that is an immediate explosion to masses. So the reaction time, so if you have an errant employee in your customer service department that's making mistakes on the phone and has ticked off, a half a dozen or a dozen potential big clients or customers or just people out there, you can react to that in a systematic way. Twitter and social media has opened up. Social media has opened up a whole new.
So I'm
sorry. I want to get Randy. Could you repeat the last bit of that?
I'm just saying that with social, what we call as social media, the Twitters, the Facebook, it has, and Snapchat. Somebody takes a screenshot or something. It has opened up, and it just in a matter of 20 minutes, an hour, it has circled the globe. And you don't know how do you harness that and get that animal back into the barn? Which I guess is what the dragon that Nazim was referring to.
Yes.
Jess?
I think it's a very hard thing, and it's also a very personal thing, because we go back to the people that are in businesses that we're working with, and going back to the culture piece, which I absolutely positively love. And I think that if a company knows what their goals are, and if a company is communicating those goals to the team, whatever that team and whoever that team is made of, very well, and there's open, transparent dialogue there internally, it is setting up the correct stage to be able to evaluate what are the possible stopgaps and understand the actual risk for that company in that space, in that place, and at that time. Because time and place are really, and people are a really important combination when we think of how does a business use social media to achieve their goals, and do we have a risk or do we not? And if there is this sphere somewhere, I think it's going to take more than training.
And by the way,
but there's always a risk, because the errant person who pissed off a client, and that client is active in social media and has a following, now your company has got to have a way to deal with that.
And that's a gap.
That was in person.
Okay,
well,
so
I think that's the fear.
Sorry, Jess, I'm just going to move on because I want to get back to platforms and not into company culture, which is extremely important. And
I've got a great suggestion about that. I'll leave it in the comments after the show because I can help with that.
Cool.
Thank you. I just want going back to platforms, and I was asking earlier because everybody's biased. Everybody thinks that Facebook is social media, and when you bring up Google Plus, we not only get apathy, we get actually hatred. We get dismissal, and I've never seen that with anything else. I don't know why people are so invested emotionally. But if you're going to a client, how would you describe what Google Plus is, Mark?
Well, that's changed over time, and I'll be very honest with you here. And I've got friends in Google Plus who maybe not like me saying this because they're very invested in the platform. But people that know me, that have followed me for the 4 years I've been here, know that I've been very much an advocate, an evangelist for it. I see the potential advantages of using it, but I've had to temper that somewhat. I'll say, in terms of I don't anymore push Google Plus to the extent that I used to, and I want to be quick to qualify that, meaning that I don't put it out there as this is the first thing you should be doing as a business, other than the obvious. I think if you're a business of any kind, and especially if you're a local business, you should definitely have a Google Plus page. It should be set up properly. It should be connected to all things Google, and you should be, at least at the minimum, putting up some content on it. Those are minimums. But beyond that, as far as pursuing the way that you make it work for business, it is more of a challenge. And again, I could do a whole show on that. In brief, I think where Google Plus works now is if you're willing to invest the time to bring audience in here. Find audience on here. First of all, Google Plus can be a great place to find people that you would not have been exposed to or not found in other social networks, but also bringing your existing audience here, incentivizing them to come and to circle your page, because then you get into the area where you can begin to influence them through personalized search. And that's whole topic on that. I think that's one of the magical parts of Google Plus that is not well understood, not explored, but it's also not easy to implement, not easy to do. It takes some work, and that's why I say I don't necessarily make it the first strategy, but when I have a business who's willing or ready to go deeper and get more bang out of their social media and their online presence, then we're ready to dig into some Google Plus strategies.
Good. What I hear you saying is that there's gold in them thar hills. It's just that you have to be willing to be able to mine it. Is that a good paraphrase?
That is a good paraphrase. And like gold mining, in the old 49er days, it's going to take some work before you get the return. So, I want to make sure that I've got a business who's up and running and comfortable being online, who's got good things in place on other social media. They know what they're doing with that. They know what they're doing with content. We've got all those things in place, and then I'm seeing Google Plus more and more. I know some people will disagree with it. I'm seeing it more as kind of an advanced level strategy of social media.
And then just a real quick follow-up, Mark, is that this time last year we were all talking about there being a potential tipping point. Well, not everyone knows about Google Plus and Hangouts and whatnot right now, but they'll, just wait a bit, and then there'll be that gold rush. Do you still think that there's going to be a tipping point, or have things settled in and what you see now is basically what we can expect going forward?
Oh boy, now you're asking me to put on the the prophet's robes. I don't know. I'm very intrigued that they put Bradley Horowitz in charge. He is a brilliant man. I think he's dedicated. I think he, just from things I heard him say early on in the early days when he was more outspoken about Google+, I think he has an understanding of the potential of this platform. So I'm intrigued by seeing what they're going to do. You know, I happen to know that there are some things they're working on. I don't necessarily think any of them are like the killer app or the killer application, but they're still toying with this thing. The thing, just you know, the summing answer to your question, I think, is what those of us that have been watching Google Plus closely over the years wonder about is when are they going to find something that really differentiates this network. You know, right now it's a great network for those of us that get really geeky about something to explore and to play with and to use, but the problem has been that there's just not, for the average person out there, there's not a reason, not a compelling reason to come here and use it when you can do basically the same things. Yeah, I know, you know, Hangouts are better than a lot of video chat, et cetera, but really, you know, for the stuff that most people do on social networks day to day, they've already got places to do it. And that's been the problem.
Yeah, I think that before we move on to the takeouts, I can't agree more. I mean, I find that I've been referring people to Google Plus as for a particular reason, the Google local page, Google My Business, is a perfect example of that. I think that companies are really, that's something they can sink their teeth in. That's something they understand because they've had Google Places for a long time, Google Maps and all that. So I'm going to, before anybody else want to respond to that before, because I want to ask one last question about the Google Plus thing, and that is basically, again, why is it that why do you think, Mark, that there is such a hatred for Google Plus, and why all these articles? Is it just link bait, or is there an actual, just because Google is just huge and they want to take it down, or what? What is the motivation behind that, do you think?
Well, you know, boy, there's as many answers to that as people have written those articles. I'm not as conspiratorial minded as some people who comment on this are. You know, like I don't term it as hatred. I don't see, you know, there are haters out there, but I don't think most of the journalists are haters. I don't think they care that much. It's just a story, and it's an easy story. You know, if I want to say anything derogatory about them, I'd say it's just laziness. You know, if you take a surface look at it, yeah, I think because it's Google, the expectations are so high, and we're so high. And even though Google, of course, never came out and said, like, we've designed this to kill Facebook, that was the immediate assumption. And you know, the fact that it hasn't killed Facebook and it doesn't really compete with Facebook, that's all some journalists, I think, or writers need to see. It's, you know, it's a failure. There's not, it's Google, and if it's not huge, then it's a failure. But I think that's the hurdle to overcome. And I don't really see most of these people like out there to get Google Plus as much as, you know, they're just looking for a story, and that's an easy one to tell. And you know, and most of them, as I tried to show in my article this week, just simply haven't done their homework. They haven't dug deep enough to understand what's really going on.
I think the responses are much more impassioned than the creator of the article that they're responding to.
Yeah, the Forbes writer called them, termed them as cult-like.
Yes.
But when you look at the people who've written the strongest anti-Google Plus articles, and you look to see, are they actually using it? Do they know what they're talking about? I have yet to find one who actually uses Google Plus, and therefore I wonder, why are you writing about it? And like Mark said, haven't done their homework, lazy.
I'm going to move on to the takeout because wow, man, we're really zooming fast. So now this is Mark's, well, actually his second appearance on the show, but we didn't have the takeout then, so I brought one in for him. I brown bagged a lunch takeout for him. So this is going to be, I'm going to highlight myself, and then this is Mark's takeout. This is I love his show. This is like 3 minutes, sort of like 3-minute brain snacks that he has on SoundCloud, and he does it every day, right, Mark?
Every weekday, Monday through Friday.
It's incredible. So I love that idea. I wish I had thought of that graphic before for our takeout, but that's okay, Mark. You can have that and keep it. So anyway, and for anybody, you can check it out on SoundCloud and go to his Google Plus profile. You'll see them posted there as well. It's a great 3-minute thing. You can turn it on and keep on working and just listen to these little pearls of wisdom come out of his mouth. So I'm going to go next to Jessica.
Right on. thinking about today's show, it made me go back to, and it's a super simple, and it's often overlooked. Giving plus receiving equals value. And this can be customized for any business, any person, any role. And when I say role, it could be in business, but it could also be in our personal life. How are we giving? How are we receiving? And what is the value? And that's what I heard coming out of today's conversation. And so when we hear a fear factor around social media or a lack of understanding, it's up to us to ask questions to be able to better facilitate what they're trying to do, so we can pull out the whole story and be able to best serve the people we're trying to work with. Because our specialty and our overall knowledge are two very different things, and both have an innate use when you put them into this equation, specialized for you. So that's what I brought today, was basically a cool summary of what I knew the show was going to be about.
Thanks, Jess. Biel, you're up. Oh, can't hear you, Biel.
What I brought is a quiz for you to be able to tell whether you are addicted to social media, and I most certainly am. This comes from Gizmodo, and the illustration just made me fall on the floor laughing. But I mean, the bottom line is, yes, I am addicted, and I bet every single one of us here is, and I wouldn't be surprised if the people who are watching us are too, because this is something that is really, if you are involved in it in a give and take kind of a way and not as a broadcaster, then it is addictive, and it's also a lot of fun.
Okay, I want to ask, how many out there and you guys tweet on the toilet? No? No? You don't bring your little smartphone?
Guilty here. Definitely guilty here. The iPad Mini was the death of me in the bathroom.
Oh, really? See,
Guilty, yeah.
Okay. We'll come out of the bathroom now. Randy.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm taking social media up rolled up $100 bill, but the worm has definitely changed. Digital is here to stay. Social media has definitely changed the way we all interact today, and that's good, and it does have its bad things. However, I don't think that it's been the panacea that we all thought it might have been. And I ran across an recent article from our friend Sam Farello of Sensei Marketing, who asks the question or poses the question: social media may not be helping your business. It's a good read. It's thought-provoking. He's not saying that it's not, but it is a good read for anybody considering that. And the main thrust would be, and it kind of goes into what we were talking about today. Do you need to be everywhere? Is it helping your business?
Thanks a lot, Randy. Scott, I know that you don't have one on screen, do you? Or
well, I don't have one on screen, but mine is one of the interesting things is that the CDC comes out with wonderful community-related research, and one of them that they participated on was principles of community engagement. So this is my high-tech graphic for that, but I'll also put it in the comment stream. And
great.
It's just a terrific report in terms of community engagement. I thought it'd be relevant to this discussion.
Thanks a lot, Scott. So mine basically is a follow-up to the Marshall McLuhan lead off, and it's the medium is the message 50 years later. And as I say, I could just sit around with maybe a scotch or brandy, Randy, and talk about this like for a whole evening. I think it's just amazingly interesting where we've gone, what effect has medium, all kinds of medium, had on society, and how we use it. And I think Mark's very right in the sense that we're so immature in the evolution of all this technology. We can't keep up. And I remember in grade 3, and yes, Randy, that was a very long time ago, my teacher saying, oh, technology is too fast. We can't keep up with it. This is grade 3. I didn't even have a color TV set yet. And now it just seems exponential. It just keeps racing and racing and racing. But our behavior can't keep up with that. Our psychology can't keep up with that. So how do we change? How do we adapt? And babies now will be looking at an iPhone the way we look at a pair of socks or whatever. I mean, it's just parts of their environment. So what future? What impact does it have on how we behave with each other? So I think so that's an article I definitely would recommend. I found it very interesting. And so that's it, guys. Mark, did you want to say anything else? Any last words?
Just fantastic to be with you all. Love this discussion. Obviously, we could have it for hours ongoingly, and that's one of the great things about this. Hopefully, it will launch a lot of conversations out there that we will continue to have. Thanks for having me.
Oh, Mark, it was definitely a pleasure. And guys, you know, I mean, anybody here in Google Plus probably know Mark already. He and Eric are an amazing couple. I mean, I don't mean that in, you know, the couple sense, Mark, but they do this great, you know, this great Abacasello thing. I mean, they had these like little nice short videos. The articles are amazing. They dig deep into stuff. The analytics are serious, but they have a real good sense of humor too. So it's always entertaining being educated. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.